Hey everybody, and welcome back to X's for Podcast. This is the Daily X. I'm Nico, and you guys can find me on Twitter and Instagram at NicoAction. That's NicoAction. As always, here at the Daily X, we look to bring you news, information, and discussions on your favorite Marvel comics, most notably the X-Men. And today is no different. Today we're going to be taking a look at Wolverine number 12. Now, Ben Percy, who's been writing Wolverine, whether it's through the Wolverine podcast or the pages of the Wolverine comic, has been doing so for several years now, and his narrative has continued to unfold in unique ways while still being true to the idea of the character that he started out with. It's been an exciting time, and in this next segment, we not only take a look at the development of his characters and his plots, but also the format of the book itself by analyzing the way he plays with the white data pages against the narrative that goes on in the comic pages. We hope you guys enjoy, and if you like what you watch, you might even want to subscribe and like this video.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another spectacular episode of the X's4P Podcast. My name is Maddie, and as always, you can find me over on Instagram at the Basely Covetous Man and over on Twitter at Basely Covetous.
Hey, I'm Nathan. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Dazzler AOA. That's Dazzler AOA.
Hey, I'm Drew. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Drewsifer3. That's at DREWSIPHER3.
And I'm Nico, and you guys can find me over here at NicoAction, NicoAction, where I think I'm technically the only person that loves Wolverine on this episode.
I wouldn't say you're the only person who loves Wolverine. I do think that we all have a very varied relationship with Wolverine, if nothing else. But if nothing else, we are assembled together today to bring you issue 12, Penumbra, of Wolverine, written by Ben Percy, with art by Scott Eaton and ink by J.P. Mayer with Oren Jr. on pages 15 to 20, and color art by Matthew Wilson. The vampires, inexplicably, are back, and they're making moves. Having recently regrouped with a newly turned Louise, Logan faces off with the former head of the Night Guard, attacking at the behest of Dracula. While Father Cole indisposed, Logan and Louise head to Krakoa to rally some reinforcements. Forge outfits Louise with a bioengineered suit capable of sustaining her in daylight and suppressing her need to feed, while the brain trust of X-Force, with the aid of Omega Red, develop a plot to use Wolverine as the ultimate bait-turned-dirty bomb. Now, we've been oscillating through plot points here in Ben Percy's run of not only X-Force, but Wolverine specifically, and the last two issues of Wolverine have made explicit comparison with the function of X-Force and the function of the CIA. While this metaphor was in everybody's early predictions of the trajectory of X-Force as a title, do you feel that the role of X-Force is in some capacity limiting the mobility of Wolverine as a standalone title? Or do you feel that having Logan situated as a major player in this organization provides a local harbor of sorts that the title can dock when not moving elsewhere?
So let me start with I'm the guy that loves Wolverine the most. And now let me go to the statement that I think we can all agree on. Wolverine doesn't need a solo title. Wolverine doesn't need a solo title because Wolverine will always be able to sell a solo title. It's a foregone conclusion that if Wolverine's name graces a motherfucking book, it's going to make it in the motherfucking top 50. That's just how this works, right? I think the thing that makes Wolverine special is when he's not there. Wolverine is someone who can create a threat in in his vacuumed absence, right? And I said her because I was immediately going to Laura, and then I was immediately going to the Storm story they just did in Marauders, where she wasn't there and everybody felt her. I can't stop thinking of characters they do this really well with, where the characters didn't even have to show up. Magneto, his looming shadow, does enough, right? So I think the place he should be is X-Force. I don't think I need Wolverine. He should just be in everything. He shouldn't have his own anything.
God, and I'm so glad that you said that and it's not at all a testament to Ben Percy's handling of the character, but there is something special about seeing X-Force appear, or some capacity of X-Force appear in the pages of Wolverine, that reminds me of his involvement in some way that in a weird subversive way, it feels kind of special, because I'm like, oh yeah, he's super involved with this. It's, if nothing else, I enjoy how Percy has been handling the shuffling of the events of his current dozen issues of this run. I definitely think that by the end of this episode, we'll have a lot to discuss regarding the singular trajectory of this title. But if nothing else, Nathan, Drew, how did you feel about Wolverine, X-Force, the kind of crossover this issue?
Okay, so I thought this was the best issue of X-Force I ever read, and then I had to read the title again, and I realized it was a Wolverine issue. So, like, like literally, I think him having both X-Force and the Wolverine solo title, it doesn't have as much, there's not as much difference, and there's not as much of a need for Wolverine to have these solo adventures, especially when they bring X-Force into them so much. Like, hands down, this definitely read like what I want X-Force to read like all the time. These last few issues, the involvement of the whole team, I'm good with it, even if it focuses just on Wolverine, but I don't know that I see the need for the two of these titles to be separate titles. I'd kind of love for them to combine back into one, and maybe it could be Wolverine and X-Force kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree. Basically, this like we could have instead of just like this could have been like we could have just made this an arc on X Force, like with the vampires, and just included the whole crew on an X Force like book. I would say either end the book or turn it into like a Wolverine family book.
Oh, I do not want to take Scout away from New Mutants though, because
No, yes,
she's-
take her away. Take her far,
no,
far away.
no,
Listen to me.
Hey, now.
There is a foreboding sense of darkness hanging over New Mutants these days, and you will get my Gabby away from that cloud of sadness. Vita should write this Wolverine family book. I'm not fighting giving Vita Gabby, but get Gabby away from this MC Escher painting that
was gonna say, it's like
it's transforming into.
It's a hodgepodge of everything you didn't know you didn't need. From there, where Ben Percy succeeds for me personally, though I recognize that I may be an island alone here, is his ability to pick up and put down plot points for later and better use. I know, and I have been super fortunate to cover a lot of Wolverine, and I think if I go back, though I haven't, admittedly, I think we've all kind of touched on this title, maybe with the exception of Drew, but please correct me if I'm wrong. But I have in the past compared him to Jonathan Hickman in some regard, and in some titles, though, this is ultimately more successful than others. Where I may feel that X-Force is a little bit lacking in a clear trajectory, the pick up and put down style of Percy's is really working for me more and more with every arc on Wolverine. Like, I recognize that at one point I was critical of it in my coverage, but he's really homogenizing the fractured elements of the story in the story of the mutants at large in a way that is still uniquely separate enough that I accept it as a Wolverine story. Do I think that there is a utility for it? Yes. Do I think that there is a necessity for it? Certainly not. But that is not a criticism of this run. Just the necessity for Wolverine to exist on his own. He should exist sparingly in a group title for a couple years and just let him be a marvel, a looming shadow in and of himself.
And, I love that you're saying how you've grown to appreciate Percy's, let's go with shelf style, right? Let's call it shelf style. Percy's really good at putting the things he needs on the shelf and picking them back up off the shelf when he needs them. He never puts them out of view. It's not about putting them in a drawer. It's on a shelf. Now, I think it's actually a really popular style at Marvel to have that sort of what we'll call cache access to ideas on retainer. You see it a lot with Jason Aaron and his transformative style across his years at Marvel, most notably across his Thor run. You can also see that across somebody like a Bendis, right, where you can see the way he would seed something in issue 1 of something and bring it full due in issue 36, especially elements of his Daredevil, which paid off across 60, 70 issues. But I think my souring on it here is because so much of the X line is leaning into this hiatus of idea kind of thing where we see a title start with something and then kind of forget it's there for a little bit. How many times did we say that about early Howard's Excalibur? How many times did we say that about how we felt immediately following Ten of Swords there wasn't enough Araco any fucking where? Right, so I think I like it because I think Ben Percy's real smart, but I wane on my interest in the device.
See, I'm kind of almost the opposite. This is the most interested I've been in Ben Percy's style since X-Force and Wolverine started. Like, they've always had the pieces there, but they never really gelled. And I think lately, for me personally, everything's been actually gelling together. We have been seeing some of the return on investment that we got from the issues that we saw earlier. Like, we are seeing them revisit these ideas. We are seeing them actually pay off these thought pieces that they put in our mind.
I was even looking at the data pages in this, and if I'm pretty sure if you go back into Percy's data pages throughout even both Wolverine and X-Force, they are pretty lengthy, like some of the most lengthy I think in like the Dawn or like the post Hoxpox X-Men. And just like you're getting like so much information from his writing and that from the issues.
And Drew, I love that you pointed that out because like I'd been trying to place what it was about his data pages that felt sort of, I don't want to say exaggerated because that's not the word, but they do feel verbose. And anyone who's ever written in both stage and comic script can tell you on a stage, you get to really like lavish your actors with these gorgeous monologues and these beautiful eloquences, and you get to really pizzazz those fuckers. But on a comic, you've got exactly as much room as your artist didn't draw in. And so frequently, the strength of Percy's writing on the Wolverine audiobook was I'm 100 years old. On the Wolverine podcast was the eloquence of his character language. And in a comic, he usually doesn't get to do that quite as much. So I really agree with you, Drew. There's something really like verboten about his data pages that I think really plays to his strengths as an author.
Yeah, and I remember, I don't remember what issue it was or what even from what series, but it was one of his data pages it was comic, and then went to like straight like novel. Like the data page was just like, and then Jean said this, and like they went here. It was like a novel data page, and then went back comic.
Well, I tell you what, early X-Force was really dense in that degree of exposition, and I feel like there is, as Nico pointed out, as Drew pointed out, there is incredible merit to that because there is such a limited, as Nico just mentioned earlier, the Wolverine audiobook, as we could call it, or podcast, as everyone but I suppose this room would call it, is that there is such expressive language use where the narrow focus of these data pages is such, it's an anathema to that. It really is making such incredible use of such small space. But to come back to that in just a little bit, I want to kind of take this straight through the issue because I feel like it's a Wolverine vampire hunting story. So there's a lot to unpack, but at the same time, there really isn't. So I'm pretty certain that the response to Louise having been turned into a vampire last issue was hit or miss for some. Like, while I personally didn't see it coming so soon, I recognize that the well of vampire-themed tropes are limited at best and derivative at worst. And there is always some aspect of betrayal in vampire hunting stories. And we see that seed get planted by the late Father Cole in the mind of Louise on behalf of Dracula, etc. So with Louise being a tertiary character at best the last dozen issues, it still doesn't hurt to speculate if in fact this arc is still what we're going to pick up on in issue 13. Are we going to ultimately see her turn on Logan, or will she be in this fight against the undead to the bitter end, regardless of her disposition?
Oh no, go Nathan. You're alphabetically.
I was gonna say I think with the inclusion of the last pages that I know we'll get to later, I think that's, for me, that story is taking the turn to where she's going to end up going with that group in the end. That's what I foresee, and she might turn on Logan in that way, going with the Severlith group, but I don't see her going with the Dracula group.
That's ultimately pretty fair. Nico, you had some thoughts there as well.
Well, Dracula's been running around Jason Aaron's Avengers being so annoying.
Totally.
And it's just so fucking annoying, right? Almost as annoying as Namor. So that's pretty big, right? So, Dracula really does always come with a betrayal energy, right? There really is some that's like a thing, like Gorilla Man and Avengers. There's always this element of someone's gonna betray the team. And I'm okay with that here. And not that I am putting anything on Percy particularly, but we do need to be careful when we tread these sort of heteronormative male predator stories that I need her not to fall in love with Solemn and then die tragically at the end of the arc.
Oh my god.
I need it not to be any form of that sort of fridge syndrome, or even, but he's so bad and it feels so good. I don't want either of those things. And again, it's not about Percy, it's about concerns with the trope of genre.
I could not be more thrilled that you took us to the trope of genre, because that harkens back to some of our immediate post Ten of Swords coverage, when we were sort of reassessing what Wolverine was as a solo title, which unfortunately, much to the despair of Wolverine as a solo title, is frequently the topic of discussion, not because of Ben Percy, but because of necessity. There was a lot of talk about how Wolverine is succeeding in this format because it plays on genre exclusivity in some way. It's not like Cable, where I believe I likened it to some sort of film, sort of sepia grain film, Tarantino, shoot 'em up. This can be a Western when it needs to, and it can be a vampire horror story when it needs to, and it can be a Jason Bourne-esque CIA, special ops story when it needs to. I think that there is a lot to be mined from. It's just a matter of how much longer we can let it sustain itself, or how much longer the title can prove to sustain itself in this oscillating format. But if we can jump back a minute, and speaking of betrayals, and touching on everyone's least favorite Russian, although I cannot say that we have a favorite Russian at the moment. Sorry, Colossus. Magic can be our favorite Russian.
Yeah,
But speaking of
hello.
betrayals, hello. I'm devastated that didn't come first to mind. I'm hurt, but thank you for immediately holding me accountable. That's what I look for from this family. Omega Red, his role in these titles is becoming more confusing for me than anything. From where I stand, I see him as poised to go in either direction as far as betrayal to whomever. Where X-Force as a title is concerned, the concept of Omega's Red's morality seemed pretty black and white. So to have him
And red.
situated in this... And red! Oh! And it's Wolverine everything! So you're welcome for the song. If every time you listen to this, I get paid 1 penny. So to have him situated in this late in the game change of heart in the pages of Wolverine makes me wonder what Ben Percy's overall intention is, having written both titles since their relaunch. So, Christ, if I had to form a question out of this, I guess it's twofold. Whose team do you really think Omega Red is playing for? And, more important, does seeing the shift in Red's characterization across two Percy properties make you at all the more inclined to revisit his role in X-Force? As for clues to what's to come.
I think that Omega Red's deception or defection against the vampires has to do with his rebirth. We know that there are some properties that they don't always tell us about, that they can mentally change people around. So I'm wondering if his change of heart, change of character has a lot to do with that rebirth process.
That's pretty fair. I do think that there has been a certain element of rebirth to the character, especially in having been literally reworked with the tainted, as you can call it, carbonadium synthesizer. So if nothing else, that could be a definitive biological reason for a shift in character. But Nico, Drew, sound off.
I was actually surprised that he flipped. I even actually have it in my notes, just because he was working with the vampires in the last issue, kind of, and now he's working against them with the X-Force. But my thing is, I'm guessing either something's gonna happen later, or he just wants to chill out. I think it was in the last issue, he was just when they were watching him, he was just chilling in the forests of Krakoa, doing his hunting thing. Maybe that's all he wants to do.
And at one point, he says he explicitly wants to be left alone to be his own mutant. So that certainly is more than enough reason in the case of him siding with the Krakoans. But Nico, what you got?
I really genuinely don't get Omega Red. I think you can kind of take your Carnages and your Omega Reds, and I guess anybody who's kind of red and kind of from the 90s, anything that looks like a hemophiliac's attempt at forming a scab, essentially is this creature of the 90s that exists only to be scary at all times. And I think Omega Red, in all of his goddamn St. Olaf Gunter looking bullshit, is one of the least compelling villains the X-Men has ever shit out of its great genetic compound. I just don't get it. I've never understood characters who their whole shit is that they're scary. Do you know what makes Mr. Sinister memorable? That he fucking looks like that, and he'll eat you! I think Omega Red looks like he's probably got a drinking problem and just needs somebody to listen to him, right?
Oh my god, yes.
And that high pony wolf shit in the back, no. And I genuinely don't get it. Like, that said, I think that's what Percy's doing. This character is just a big ball of shit. Whether he's getting misused by Jim Lee, or he's getting misused by Daniel Way, or he's getting misused by anyone along the way, he's just big, angry Russian killbot. He doesn't have a lot of nuance. And I think that's what Percy's playing against. You love this character, what the fuck is there to love?
That is certainly one take on it. Holy hell. I absolutely do love that. I do think that there is a lot of attention being paid to Omega Red because, again, Percy is leading X-Force and Wolverine. We're seeing a lot of interplay with Omega Red over on X-Force. We maybe a little bit thought that thread was left cold for a while after the Cold War conclusion to the Russian collusion arc. That was a little bit contrived and a lot of bit ridiculous. And I feel like there is a great neutering happening of Omega Red where I feel truly, and I really hope that I'm hitting the nail on the head here, and I really hope that I'm not being diminutive of anybody's work, but I feel like this is a last-ditch effort to make Omega Red visible, if not accessible, in the age of Krakoa. And if not, he's going to end up the way of Sabretooth, and I'll be entirely honest, I would have been much happier, though I wouldn't change a single thing about House and Powers as a big ol' fanboy. I would have been just as happy to see Omega Red thrown in the hole for 18 to 24 months of publication by the time of this release, and to have seen Sabretooth see that last-ditch effort for redemption, because if nothing else, as Nico pointed out, there is something spectacularly, and I use the term technically, spectacularly ridiculous about Omega Red. He screams the 90s. He's if a hair metal frontman turned into a transformer that was also Whiplash. It's fucking ridiculous, and that's nobody's fault except the 90s.
He literally looks like out there somewhere there's a Shih Tzu that looks exactly like him waiting to enter a dog competition in a Christopher Guest movie. That is what he looks like.
See, I thought...
I don't hate anyone who's created him or worked on him or anything. It's not about that. It's about an echo. It's about this character presents no print. He is an echo of extremity, but he is an extreme lack of substance. I just don't want anybody to think like I fucking hate Jim Lee. I don't fucking hate Jim Lee. Jim Lee, I'm the son you never had. Adopt me, Dad. You know, like, I love Jim Lee, but like, I really don't get Omega Red.
I always thought Omega Red was the basis. They realized they fucked up and they were like, okay, let's create Sunyaka instead for the Icolot. So
I really don't even know. Drew, do you have any Omega Red hate to spew?
I mean, I don't have hate or love. He's just like a big giant brick meat sack, you know,
exactly,
like that's all he is. And like he's just like I don't like what is like name a personality trait of Omega Red. Like I don't really know. He's, you know, angry, I guess, but like you know, there's just not really much to him. And I don't, and again, like Nico said, it's not necessarily like he's like not like a main, like he's not like a big X-Men villain, you know. He's like B-list, C-list, you know, like
he's down there for sure.
Yeah,
he's down there for
he's Logan's
sure.
Tentacle monster.
He is literally all snake arms. He's all snake arms and no substance.
If anybody threw him in the hole for 18 months though during during Hoxpox, would anybody have missed him? Like people miss Sabretooth because he's a lot more compelling, but nobody would have missed Omega Red.
I just reread Uncanny X-Men War of the Realms. No, actually, I'm not trying to be weird, and I'm certainly not going off topic. We'll do a separate video about this. Sabretooth deserves the hole, like more than almost any other X-Men villain.
Oh, he does.
He is heinous, and I'm actually setting a note to make a video of this.
Because he literally turns on Earth in the War of the Realms and pledges his allegiance to Malekith on the spot. It was the most fucking egregious thing. It was
I've
absurd.
never been so happy to see Liana kick somebody's head into a stepping disc. So.
That was really thrilling for me.
You know, I just can't get over if we're gonna air our grievances. If this is indeed Festivus for the rest of us, I can only pivot to one thing, and it's been eating at me since I read this however many days ago. It is no secret that the Dawn of X era has its clone problem to get a handle on. From Zeb Wells' handling of Madeline Pryor over in Hellions to Jerry Dugan's work on Cable, there is a certain degree of uncertainty surrounding the role of clones in the modern X era. And that being said, it's surprising to see, or it's as surprising to see a living Wolverine clone used as a decoy in a council-sanctioned organization as it is unsurprising to know that the idea was fucking greenlit by Beast. So
Of course it was.
of course it was, because this is X-Force Junior. So if nothing else, what are your thoughts on the inconsistent and perhaps hypocritical use of Krakoan-grown here's a 5 times fast. Krakoan-grown clones.
Who can make the stuff bad? Sprinkle it with bad. The Beastie Man can. That's my entire fucking opinion on this character anymore.
It's
Mike
all
drop.
fucking bad, and man, it's really fucking bad.
Fighting goodness with his bad stuff. Winning evil with his bad stuff. Sailor Beast is a dumb fuck. Like, I mean, it is. He is a
douchebag. He's called Beast.
Yeah. Drew, do you also Sailor Moon that you care like the rest of us, or no?
I haven't watched Sailor Moon in like 20 years, so.
Oh my god, I'm doing a watch of that right now. I've never watched it before.
That is somehow 25 years overdue.
Yeah,
I'm just saying it is near and dear and special. And then if you're a dark sick fuck like me and you enjoy Sailor Moon, you get to watch Puella Magi Madoka Magica, and that's a fucking deep cut. If anyone wants to hit me up on Twitter, but none of you ever do.
But hold on, if we can just motherfucking talk for 2 seconds about Pretty Guardian, because PGSM is my everything, and I think we should all take more time to respect and obsess over the live action Sailor Moon Sentai.
Ooh, I've added that to my list because I've heard it's amazing.
It is actually breathtaking.
I have friends who podcast anime, so we're gonna get a joint venture going. I think that if not for what comes directly after the Dirty Bomb scene, and best believe I'm gonna get us there to the fucking epilogue, but I might have felt a bit underwhelmed by the resolution, or at least current appeasement of the Dracula plot. Now, there's the whole epilogue to discuss in just a moment, but for what it's worth, was anybody's first reaction kind of like, well, foiled again, to the way that Percy kind of kept Dracula at bay this time?
Yeah, I just kind of feel like they could have done this like a lot. Like this could have been done in any issue. Like they could have just thrown they could have done it in the Wolverine when he was in that cabin that was full of them with the teenagers. He could have done it there. You know, like it could have been resolved. It's just kind of like a snap of the fingers. Oh, we're done. Like bye.
Yeah, a little bit. I feel like if this were the first time, I would be a little bit more forgiving of it, but I understand that I understand not wanting to wrap up this impending Dracula plot in the span of 2 issues after not having touched it for 6 issues. There's nothing wrong with wanting to give something the time that it deserves. And I definitely understand wanting to touch base with this before it was literally too far out of sight, out of mind, because we've talked about like shelving certain ideas. I think bringing this back into the fold came at the absolute appropriate time. Do I think that we dismounted from it properly? Meh. I think what came next, if nothing else, was what was truly spectacular. But if nothing else, I wanna just really touch on the Dirty Bomb conclusion, because I want to tie things back to Drew's mention of the data pages, because I'm a goddamn elephant. I don't forget. I truly think that all of the inclusion of the microbiology in the data pages, which out of respect for the 3 of you and everybody listening, I'm not going to pretend that I understand personally, but it's what floated this Dirty Bomb conclusion for me. You know, the Wolverine clone being used with the antigen from a fungal, composite to make the blood clocks inactive, or for whatever reason, turn on the vampires that use them. I think this issue and the last were ripe for a very densely detailed explanation for not only the compatibility of the antigens in Logan's blood to justify the blood clocks, but with Beast's explanation of KP4, the toxin responsible for the bioweapon inside the clone. That data page, Drew, paid off a whole issue later. Like, if nothing else, and we've been a little critical of Wolverine as a series, but that is competency.
Yeah.
I mean, no, the criticism is of okay, hold on. Okay. Everybody go back. The word criticism comes from I'm kidding. No, but like I do get what you mean. I don't feel like we've ever been critical of Percy's ability. I feel like we're critical of the corporate comics container execution of some of his ideas. And I do think that the elements you're pointing to are really spectacular. It's never that Percy himself isn't a great writer, because he is. I mean, we all love Wolverine, the podcast, and we all, tend to enjoy his work in comic form. I think there's this joke, right? And it's from an old episode of Will and Grace. And Grace is reading a People magazine, and she's talking about how she's actually really blown away by Sarah Michelle Gellar and her depth and her complexity reading this article, because it all kind of starts kind of like on the set of Buffy, but she starts talking about like disarming warheads and peace in the Middle East, and it's really powerful. And Will says, "Grace, are you sure?" And she goes, "Oh wait, nope, I just combined it with an article about Colin Powell. Oh wait, here it is. Limos are still really cool after all this time." I should have thought something was up when she started talking about her time at a POW camp. And that is exactly this Wolverine book for me. I'm not even kidding. Like, parts of it, I'm like, wow, the Gaza Strip and disarming Palestine. And then limos are still really cool after all these years. And that is my relationship with this book. So sometimes it's just vampires bite, but sometimes it is this deep level science where at a certain point you just kind of go argle, gargle, google, goop, because it just does start to be like so much science, and you have to be in a science brain to read it. I think the dude is so talented. I think Wolverine, because it is a book that will always be in print, comes with a lot of caveat to it. And I believe that does in many ways infringe on Percy's ability to be the genius that he is. So when he is able to sneak little things like that in, like the near iridescence of the brilliance that comes along with shaping a science formula to prove your idea, I think that is so spectacular. But it's corporate comics, man.
I think one of the things this book is doing a good job of highlighting, and it's really underscored how it's doing it, is, like we mentioned earlier, a lot of the hypocrisies of Krakoa. There's a lot of wrinkles in Krakoan society that they've been popping up, but the two main ones, obviously, the use of the clone Wolverine is the dirty bomb, but also, to me, the hypocrisy of having Louise be on the island herself when they wouldn't bring Kamala Khan and the rest of the champions on when they needed to escape from the U.S. government at the time. So I just think X-Force and its CIA role is exposing a lot of the hypocrisies of the society.
I definitely have to agree with that, and if nothing else, I'm going to move us along to what really succeeds for me in this issue, which has to be the last 5 pages. I mean, Christ, during our coverage of Ten of Swords, there was such a good deal of attention paid to all of these early teasers, speculations made about the function and utilization of many of these new characters and locations. And the majority of these characters and locations have been disregarded in the many months since that event ended. So that said, I still wholly expect to see Solemn return to the pages of Wolverine before the year's out. But I was absolutely gobsmacked to see the organic inclusion of Sevalith and the reintroduction of the Horseman Death.
Yes.
From a title that's danced around progressing in strictly one direction, the tide has certainly shifted in a short but powerful epilogue. So what are your thoughts on the deftness of Percy's dismount here at the end of a dozen issues?
I think that this ending of this issue was the ending that, I hate to say this, it's the ending I needed, but I didn't know that I needed. So it's the ending that I wanted, but I didn't know that I needed, because it's a really natural progression of it. And actually the way they describe vampirism in the first panel that we're on Sevalith is so magical and amazing, and just the idea that it may have sprung from Sevalith itself is really exciting.
Yeah, I'm honestly excited to see how it's gonna play out next. Just because, like, when all of those Otherworld data pages came up during X of Swords, I kind of just like skimmed past them. So I actually didn't really know this was around. I kind of like figured it out with the editor's note and stuff. But yeah, I'm like super interested with the last panel and like what's gonna lead to.
After all these years, limos are still really cool.
Hey guys, if you like that cut from X4 Podcast, you'll be sure to like some of our other materials. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out these other amazing videos here at X4 Podcast.